night were just huddled around their mother, many of them in tears, and maybe a mother would be she might be nursing a child and two or three others at her side, and they were kind of quiet and subdued. As the days progressed, fortunately, the little ones got back into a playful mode, and we did have some volunteers that were playing with the children. The teachers came over after school every night in order to, get them involved in some type of an activity. And they stayed in this church probably until Thursday and Friday night. A few more were leaving each night because they felt that their neighbors were there and that maybe they could go back to their apartments. And that was our plan, that we're here just to give them that sense of security that they needed. We called this a safe haven for them. But, of course, as we did that, we had to feed them, and we had to answer many of their questions and bring in legal teams and give medical help, etc. So the children, fortunately, they kind of bounce. However, one boy, it was a very poignant story for me. I met him last week, and I said, "Hi, Pedro," and he said, "Hi, Sister Mary." And I said, "Pedro, how are you?" And he said, "I am so sad. They have taken away my mother." So many little people we were responding to in that nature. Others, I would say today to somebody, "Hi, Maria, where is your mother?" And she'd say maybe inside. She was probably seeking some assistance from us. "And what about your dad?" And she'd say, "I don't know where he is." So the children are really, really hurt. I know that one child has just kind of withdrawn into himself and isn't communicating. And not only were our Hispanic little ones affected, the other children in the school were having nightmares of our Anglo brother and sisters because they were afraid that ICE would come in and take away their mother and father. So the whole town is traumatized.
Sister Mary, we hear a lot about some ICE agents sort of describe these as sort of criminal immigrant sweeps, surges against potential terrorists. So I assume that your town does not consider this community a haven for terrorism.
My heavens, no. Our town has welcomed our Hispanic brothers and sisters. They've lived side by side. Our children have formed strong friendships. In fact, last week in school, some children signed a petition that simply said, "Do not take our friends away." So we've been a very welcoming town, and we have appreciated the gifts that they have brought to us, and we have appreciated the work that they are doing for us so that we can have food on our table. And we also, what we have done is our children were in school becoming very well-educated, bilingual persons, and now we're going to lose these future bilingual leaders within our country.
I noticed that the day after the raid, half of the 600 students in the system didn't come to school. Was that because they were afraid? Was that solidarity?
They were afraid, and their mothers were afraid to let them out of their sight. So that on Tuesday, the school principal and guidance counselor came with a bus saying, "Would you like to go to school? We'll take you to school. We'll bring you back to your mothers." But many of the mothers said no, they were not going to let them go. They didn't want to let their children out of their sight. They had already lost maybe their husband or a brother or an uncle or something like that, and they didn't want to lose their children. By Wednesday and Thursday, a few more said you can go to school and then come back at 3:30, 4 o'clock. So that Tuesday, I think it was the mothers not wanting the children to be out of the sight and the children not wanting to be out of the sight of their parent.
It's been reported that the Bush administration are using these raids and has targeted your small town so that you could feel the heat a little more and you'd support the immigration reform. If you were the president's advisor for a minute or two, what would you tell him if you had his ear?
Well, I'd say two things. Number one, I thoroughly believe that we need a total transformation of our immigration law and system. It is not respecting the individual person. It is not appropriate for the year 2008 in our multicultural world. I would also say, if they are using poor children and mothers and fathers and breaking up families to prove a point, I think there would be a much better way to enforce a law and to prove a point than by affecting people at the core of their heart, as we have experienced this week. We have experienced trauma because of a very poorly written immigration law. And so I would say, yes, we need a reformed immigration law. But please do not try to enforce something that is not a good law that has so affected families and children. So I would be upset if they were using Postville as an example of the fact that we need a new law. There are other ways to do it rather than definitely hurting people right at the core of their heart.
How many people live in Postville?
We have a town of approximately 2,000 to 2,500 people. And probably by the end of all this, we'll be down to 1,500, something like that.
And how many you think were affected of the people who live in the town? Everybody?
The whole town was affected.
You think it'll ever be the same?
It will never be the same of the rich cultural diversity that we had in Postville for the last 8 or 10 years. But I know that the people have been very strong, and they'll try to pull together. But Postville will be very sad. We'll be like Pedro, saying we are sad because we have lost families that enriched the town of Postville.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much, Sister Mary McCaleb, for taking the time out. I know that you have been besieged and you are doing the people's work, and it's good that people knew at least they could come to St. Bridget's Church and find you and others there and get the support, at least some of the support that they needed in the face of such a difficult moment in their lives. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're most welcome, and thank you for calling. Mm-hmm.